that there are other colors in the spectrum. I don't know. It's kind of frightening, but we'll see how it goes. I want to talk about this bill that's been proposed in Florida by Governor DeSantis, which his name is very close to D-sanity, which, I think it would work, because I assume that would be the same as insanity. But Governor DeSantis has put forward a bill that is to criminalize protests. These bills are being pushed around the country. And this one's particularly hilarious and wonderful. It allows, among other things, the running over of protesters and the such. I'm going to get into reading some of the details of what this bill proposal says, this latest attempt to make protest illegal. Because let me just say this up top. When it's becoming more and more clear by more and more people that they're becoming informed and they're realizing, hey, the emperor has no clothes, and they start yelling, oh, the fucking emperor has no clothes, and more people start seeing that and they start saying it, then the ruling elite, the establishment, have to find ways to do two things. One is stop them from saying that, so you can do that by disinformation, you can do that by shutting them up, and another is to arrest them and lock them up. For saying the emperor has no clothes. This is a corporatocracy that does not answer to the people. And so that's why you're seeing this increase of laws against protesting around the country. So this is the latest one down in Florida by Governor DeSantis, basically a Trump protege, I think is what he is. And I'm going to read you some of what's in this bill. And also the ACLU's response to it. By the way, I want to thank Jason Yon for alerting me to this latest bill. So thanks for that. So here's what the ACLU down in Florida says. Governor DeSantis' proposal is undemocratic and hostile to Americans' shared values. This effort has one goal: silence, criminalize, and penalize Floridians who want to see justice for Black lives lost to racialized violence and brutality at the hands of law enforcement. Also, I do find that there's a real problem with the fact that it's very tough to say Floridians, and I feel like it'd be even tougher if I were drunk, and most Floridians are drunk. So you would imagine that most people in Florida are probably calling themselves Floridians. Floridians. But so to continue from the ACLU, the Constitution firmly protects protests even when, and especially when, they challenge government policy. You don't think? That's one of the main fucking reasons for protest, is to challenge government policy. I mean, if you have, let's make protest legal unless you want to challenge government policy. Well, then what the fuck are we protesting? We want more flavors at the ice cream parlor. Let's all get out in the streets and demand. We need another flavors because there's like 6 and we want 9. So challenge government policy and express dissatisfaction with the status quo. Instead of acknowledging, again, this is the ACLU, instead of acknowledging and addressing police brutality and violence in our state, Governor DeSantis wants to use his power to throw more people into the criminal legal system by enacting overly harsh criminal penalties for protesters who are exercising their constitutional right. Oh yeah, that's right. It's in the Constitution, isn't it? That it says right there, right to assemble, right to get together and say fuck you. That's kind of in our Constitution, right? We were kind of real clear on that. Exercising their constitutional right to take to the streets and demand justice under the guise of protecting public safety. By the way, anytime you see awful laws passed, it's always to protect public safety or to make things cleaner, sanitary. It's for public hygiene and health. Whenever awful shit's going down, it's always for those same reasons. But, and of course it's bullshit. Under the guise of protecting public safety and residents, this proposal would deny fundamental due process to protesters by eliminating their right to bail, which is another aspect of this bill that's proposed. Instead of addressing the violence protesters in cities across the state have been subjected to, not perpetrating, but subjected to at the hands of law enforcement. DeSantis is doubling down on his disdain for dissent. This is not what democracy looks like. So that's the ACLU. Now, let me read you some of the things. And by the way, some of you might be in Florida. Some of you have nothing to do with Florida. This is not just happening in Florida. These laws against protest have been put forward in various states, mostly Republican states, maybe exclusively, although I'm not sure about that, but Republican-run states, and to stop protest. And, of course, the Democrats don't like most protests either, especially ones that get in the way of, let's say, pipelines and oil and gas and those things. But these bills are mainly being put forward in Republican-led states. And I don't know that these were written by ALEC, but ALEC is a well-known institution that basically puts forward bills in state houses around the country. And because lawmakers are both idiots and sociopaths, and many of them, and lazy is another one. They're lazy. They want to spend their time calling to get more donations rather than having to write bills. They often will take whatever ALEC gives them, and they'll just scratch out the name ALEC and write their name at the top. So that's how you end up with similar bills around the country, things like ag-gag laws that try to make it illegal to film factory farming because they know that if it's filmed, it is so fucking repulsive. It is such a crime against living beings that no one would be okay with it. Even those who are like all into, fucking, I love to have a steak and then I stick it inside a turkey and I stick that inside a duck and I wrap it in bacon and then I smother that in bologna. That's what I like to call baloney. Even for those people, if they saw those videos, they'd be retching. But so that's one example of how these bills get put forward around state houses across the country. But let me read you some of this insane act put forward in Florida. It's called the Combating Violence, Disorder, and Looting and Law Enforcement Protection Act. Yeah, the law enforcement really needs protecting. Law enforcement across this country has had a real tough time recently, haven't they? They need some protection is what they need. Guess what? It's already illegal to assault a police officer. That already exists, okay? So to be like, they need some protection, no, it's already illegal. All this extra shit they're adding on is just to make protest illegal. So here are some of them. New criminal offenses to combat rioting, looting, and violence. Prohibition on violent or disorderly assemblies. Third-degree felony, these are felonies, third-degree felony when 7 or more persons, 7 people together is really threatening. 7 or more persons are involved in assembly and cause damage to property or injury to other person. 7 people. So what if you just an outdoor orgy, all right, and someone gets injured, which happens because you're often twisting in very unusual ways. So does that count? There's a 7-person assembly of sorts. But here's the other thing: is when they say and cause damage to property or injury. A lot of these protests have been infiltrated not just by police. Sometimes plainclothes police will be joined into the protest so that they can try and steer where it goes. But you also have them infiltrated by things like the white supremacist groups, the Proud Boys, or the other boys. I don't know why they all have boys in the name, like they're little children. I mean, they are infantile, but anyway, you have them infiltrated by those type of people who are trying to create violence, cause harm. They want that shift in a peaceful protest to shift towards breaking windows so that it's easier to arrest people. That is a useful tactic for those who want to stop protest. So you often have that, and then that's what the cops can do. They can do that very easily. Let's say there's a peaceful protest demanding that there be an investigation, like there was in Denver the other day, investigation into killing of an unarmed black person, and the police don't like that because it makes them look bad. So what do? Well, an undercover cop or whatever joins the protest, breaks a window. All right, now that whole group, let's say it's 1,000 people, are part of a property damaging protest, a violent protest. And we could have a whole other debate about how property damage is not, equivalent to injury to humans. Property damage is, the way they define it is a brick through a window. They don't define damage to property when the banks repossess your house, which arguably far more damage to your property is when it's stolen from you by a big bank. But that's not called property damage, right? Let's keep going. Prohibition or obstructing roadways. Third-degree felony to obstruct traffic, which, by the way, traffic does not own the roads. These cities are ours. They are the people's. They are not just the cars. They are, which the same could go for why, there should be bike lanes everywhere, and it should be legal to ride your bike on the street, because cars do not own these spaces. Just because a road is paved doesn't mean, cars can go down here 100 miles an hour. Doesn't matter if they run over a fucking baby carriage. Just, it's their space. No, it's not. It's still, the road is still part of the city. It's part of everyone's space. It is a shared, communal space. And that's how it should be treated. So the obstructing traffic should not be illegal. But third-degree felony to obstruct traffic during an unpermitted protest. And this permit shit is another way that they try and stop protests, because a permitted protest is not really a protest, is it? A permitted protest is a talking to the authorities and asking what's agreeable for them. Will it be okay for you if we come down for an hour and tell you that you fucking suck balls? And then we'll go home after that hour and we'll head on back to our houses quietly after we've made it clear that you suck of the balls. No, it's a permitted protest is not a real protest. It's it's a demonstration of some sort. You could say it's a little festivity, maybe a little parade, but it's not an actual. You're not actually interrupting business as usual if you have a permit and everyone agrees this is where we'll come stand and be friendly. Okay, traffic during an unpermitted protest, demonstration, or violent or disorderly assembly. Driver, and then they add on, I tack this on, driver is not liable for injury or death caused if fleeing for safety from a mob. Now, let's take these things piece by piece and see what this really says. A mob, in legal definition, is anybody you don't like, right? You got 5 people over there. Oh, they're Eagles fans. Well, I don't like fucking Eagles. That's a mob down there. Look at them, that mob. Whereas 5 of you and your friends, that's not a mob, right? That's just a group of cool people hanging out. So mob doesn't mean anything. It sounds really scary, a mob, but mob doesn't mean anything unless legally it's fucking anyone you don't like. So you could call anything a mob. I mean, I think Congress is a mob, okay? They're a very violent. I mean, if you want to look at stats, number of people killed, Congress and our government is one of the most murderous, killing, violent mobs you've ever seen. So they're a mob. So take the word mob out because it's meaningless. Fleeing for safety. Well, what does fleeing for safety mean if you were defending yourself in a court? Well, you could argue anyone in a car is fleeing for safety from the mob. You've already defined this protest, peaceful or otherwise, as a mob. And therefore, if you're driving away from it, you are fleeing it. So really, with all that terminology, it sounds very scary. Fleeing from a mob, none of it legally means it could be anybody driving. So what this sentence really says is a driver is not liable for the injury or death to a protester, period. End of sentence. Meaning, people could drive through protesters legally, murdering people legally. This is fucking horrific, okay? It is, and obviously we've seen this happen. I know it sounds ridiculous, but we've seen it happen. We've seen it happen in Standing Rock, where the people drove through the protesters and some were injured. And we, of course, saw it in Charlottesville, where a woman was killed. And I was 5 feet from that, and it was fucking terrifying and terrible. It was a terrorist act. That's what it should be. And now the guy from Charlottesville is serving, I think, a life sentence for murdering someone for a terrorist act, which is what it, he should have been charged as a terrorist act. So that's how it should be. But if this law had been passed in Charlottesville at the time, that guy would be legally get off. Now, of course, it was his intention to run people over, but could they prove that? Or would they just say he was fleeing from a mob? It completely allows anyone to fucking harm protesters and get away with it. Let's keep going. Second-degree felony to destroy public property during a violent or disorderly assembly. That's increased the... prohibition. I didn't read the title. Prohibition of destroying or toppling monuments. So now it's a felony to bring down, well, if this were to get passed in Florida, it would be a felony to bring down a monument because they consider that destruction of public property. Now, keep in mind, the monuments that have been torn down are of Confederate soldiers and generals. So weren't they involved in the destruction of people? I think they killed a lot of people. So I think that's something that should be talked about, right? Why did they get a statue? Anyway, they're increasing these crimes to a ridiculous level on top of everything else. Prohibition on harassment in public accommodations. First-degree misdemeanor for a participant in a violent or disorderly assembly to harass or intimidate a person at a public accommodation, such as a restaurant. All right, so think of the word intimidate. What does that mean legally? That basically legally means you're like, fuck you. That's intimidation. In Denver, they're trying to prosecute someone for destruction of property and intimidation because he grabbed a fascist sign and ripped it up. A sign supporting, fascism. And the idea of intimidation, well, guess what? I'm intimidated when police kill people. I'm intimidated by police because they run around killing people who are unarmed and posing no threat. So can I just say I'm intimidated by police and then they'd get a misdemeanor? No, I don't think so. This bullshit only applies to people who are protesting because the state wants to shut you up. The corporate fucking state, the right-wing monsters in charge in Florida want to shut you up. And it's amazing because this should go for anyone, right? There are right-wing protests. There are Republican protests. They shouldn't like these laws either because these laws are bad for them too. It makes illegal their right to assembly as well. Let's see, a couple more, then I'll wrap this up. But let's see, there's increased penalties for striking a law enforcement officer, which was already illegally. I mean, it was already illegal. You didn't have to, they don't need to keep adding shit on. Let's make it more illegal to strike a police officer. But of course, as a lot of people pointed out, and has happened again and again, people often are getting tackled by police. And A, they don't know what's happening. B, they don't know why they're being tackled. So then the police claim that that they were struck or whatever, that they were punched. The woman who at Occupy served a year in prison for striking a police officer because she was grabbed from behind, didn't know who was grabbing her, swung her elbow around and hit him in the face. Isn't it natural human behavior to try and swing your arms and get out when someone you don't know grabs you from behind? I think that's natural instinct. I'd like to see even a right-winger, a fucking Trump supporter, be like, yeah, when someone comes up behind me, I have no idea who they are or why they're grabbing me. I just peacefully let them. And then I sing Kumbaya. No. So again, this hurts everybody. Anybody who wants to be involved in actually standing up to this goddamn shit show. Let's see, throwing an object. That's another one they love. As if throwing a water bottle should be equivalent to fucking Katniss in the Hunger Games and her crossbow. Like shooting an arrow is the same as someone tossing a water bottle. Now, look, I'm not saying everybody always throw water bottles at each other. It's not nice, kind of annoying. But to act like you're a fucking evil villain because a water bottle was thrown is fucking pathetic and horrible and a terrible descent into, a fascist type of legal system that we've been heading down this path for a long time. Let's see here. I like this one. No defund the police permitted. Prohibits state grants or aid to any local government. So these are local governments within Florida. To any local government that slashes the budget. Now, in this document, slashes is not defined. So is that a cut of 3%? 2%? Is that slashing the budget? Slashes the budget for law enforcement services. So again, they could do anything to mean slashing the budget. So let's say a mayor sees the writing on the wall. He has protests every day against demanding defunding the police and holding them accountable. And he says, okay, here's some things we're going to do. We're going to decrease police funding by 5%, which is nothing. It's not enough of a decrease. But let's say he says that. 5%, and we're going to start having investigations into police killings, et cetera, et cetera. And then the state, under this bill that DeSantis is putting forward, could say, hey, we're not giving any more state grants to this municipality because you slashed the budget of your police department. It's fucking ridiculous. And state grants are important to a lot of local governments and areas. So this is significant. This seems like it should be unconstitutional too. I don't know every legal argument, but the idea that you could put into law, hey, everybody, it is illegal from here on out to decrease the funding of your police at all. To me, that's insane. Because the whole point of the police or any organization in any area is that the governing body, right? Democracy, remember that? Democratic Republic, you vote in a representative. If people demand something, it happens. So if the people demand that the police have their funding decreased by some amount, and then the representatives go, wow, the people really want this, and then they decrease the funding, that should be how government works. And by the way, that would never happen because our representatives don't listen to us, but that should be how the government works. I mean, this is basically putting into law something saying from here on out, our government will not work. Now, our government isn't working to begin with, but this would put it in the law saying it's not allowed to work. I mean, it's insane. Let's see here. The victim of crime related to violence. Victim compensation waives sovereign immunity to allow a victim of a crime related to a violent or disorderly assembly to sue local government for damages. This one so there's two more important ones, definitely. No bond or bail until first court appearance if charged with a crime related to participating in a violent or disorderly assembly. Now, keep in mind, I already made clear that disorderly assembly means nothing. That could be any assembly that you don't like, right? The orgy of 7 people in the road. Well, that's disorderly. I mean, there's no order there. Or like the Eagles fans that you don't like. We'll change the team because, for those of you who are Eagles fans, you're probably starting to get pissed. The Cowboys fans that are out there and they're drunken. That's disorderly. That's a disorderly assembly. There's 8 of you out there and you're drunk. Disorderly assembly. So if you got arrested for participating in that, now you can't get bail or bond. You can't get out of jail until your first appearance. But they can put off your first appearance a lot of times for a while. So often, despite the fact you're completely innocent, you will sit in jail just to fucking make you miserable. And so the state can make protesters completely miserable, upset their lives, give them all kinds of problems, psychological and physical. Obviously, they could end up getting COVID-19 in prison. There's a million things that can go on before even your first court appearance. And then finally, government employment and benefits terminates state benefits and makes anyone ineligible for employment by local government if convicted of participating in violent or disorderly assembly. So first of all, state employment is something that's in a lot of areas is very common for often. I mean, it's very important for a lot of classes. A lot of lower class, sometimes even middle class workers work in some way connected to the state. So the state is a massive employer. So to say from here on out, because you were at a protest, you can't be hired by the state is fucking awful. To a lot of people, but more important, terminate state benefits. Now, state benefits can be things like public housing, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. There's so many things that are benefits from the state that would be cut off because you went to a protest demanding justice for those murdered by police. I mean, this is the opposite of how our country should be working. It's totally repulsive. And like I said, this is not, so they're pushing this in Florida. Hopefully he can't get it through. I don't know what the odds are. Hopefully people stand up. Hopefully people protest it. But they're pushing this kind of shit around the country. So everybody needs to be vigilant and get furious about this stuff. At the same time, these type of things are used to distract us because they know we can't pay attention to everything all the time. So you use bills like this to get people furious about that. Meanwhile, they're not paying attention to other things that are going on. So it serves a dual purpose, whether they get this through or not. It takes more of a devotion by the people to stand up against it. And when there's multiple crises all stacked on top of each other and multiple assaults on our civil liberties all stacked on top of each other, it's very tough to fight them all. And speaking of that, in the many battles, by the way, you can learn more about this by looking up ACLU-FL for Florida, ACLU-FL, I think it's .org. One last point in these last couple minutes, speaking of multiple battles, is I hope everyone's paying attention to Julian Assange's trial that continues to go on. I'll try and talk about this more in an upcoming video, but world leaders have started coming out for Assange, which is really great to see. Lula down in Brazil, the former president of Brazil. He's got a former prime minister of Australia. You obviously have these, well-known whistleblowers like Daniel Ellsberg. Recently, a letter was put out from an organization called Lawyers for Assange, that have put together well-known and high-powered lawyers in many different nations demanding Assange's freedom. There's also Doctors for Assange also demanding his freedom and his health be considered throughout all of this. I've moved from thinking there was about a 0% chance that Assange could actually beat this extradition and not be shipped to the United States to thinking that there may be some sort of chance. There may be a 3% chance that the empirical forces that have come together to crush him do not succeed in shipping him to the United States. But it's going to take you all. It's going to take everybody caring about it, looking into it, watching. Even NBC News reported on the fact that world leaders were coming out in support of Assange and demanding his freedom. So when the corporate media hacks start reporting on it, that's a big step because that means it's getting beyond the point that they can ignore it. So keep an eye on that. Check out Consortium News if you want a lot of updates on Assange. Great reporting on it. Also check out Kevin Gastolo's been doing great stuff on Twitter. And many others. There's too many to list that have been doing great work on Assange, but keep paying attention to it. And please share this video so that more people will hear about this. I bring these videos to you, Moment of Clarity, every single weekday, except sometimes. And whenever you miss one, just go to leecamp.com. That's where they're all posted all the time, so you can learn what you missed. leecamp.com. And check out my podcasts. Government Secrets is one of them, and Common Censored is the other. Hope you'll listen to both. All right, keep fighting.